I'm going to ask Tasun to, Tasun, am I pronouncing your name properly? The Tasun?
Yeah, it's Tasun.
Tasun.
Yeah, Tasun.
I'm going to give the floor to Tasun to introduce himself and his work. As I said, this, as advertised, this is a discussion about case studies of post-colonial or decolonizing education from both the global north and the global south. So Tasun will be giving us examples from the global south, his native Ghana, and also some Ghanaian heritage in my background as well. So I'm very, a little bit of a horse in the race with this. So I'm going to pass over to Tasun, and over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for the introduction. Please, I mean, am I audible enough, or is it okay?
Can you hear me? Fine, thank you.
All right. Okay, so I think you've said much about me. I'm a PhD student based in Germany, currently in Düsseldorf, and my PhD project is in folk tales of the Konkomba people of Ghana. And I'm looking at the form-content relationship between, and the form-content relationship in folk tales from Northern Ghana, especially the Konkomba people. And my aim is to expand the frontiers of formalism to account for other perspectives from the global north, such as the Konkomba context. So basically, that's what my research examines or looks at. I'm from Ghana, and this is my second year into the program. I'm very happy to be here to share my opinions or my perspectives or thoughts on the issue of decolonizing education, and looking forward to hearing from the other speakers and the participants and everybody here. Now, how much I would like to say that the issue of decolonization or decolonizing education is quite dear to my heart, and it's one of the reasons or one of the motivating factors for my involvement in one of the projects that we are running here at Heinrich Heine University in Düsseldorf. Now, this program is an offspring of my PhD dissertation or research work. As I said, my PhD is based, or my PhD work is into literature or into oral literatures of minority groups such as the Konkomba people. And I'm specialized in the area of folktales of this minority ethnic group. Now, out of this project has emerged a project called, or that we have titled, Demarginalizing Orature, translating minor forms into the digital age. And what we seek to do, among other things, this particular digitization project, the goals are: one, to give visibility to indigenous oral literatures; two, to promote indigenous knowledge; and to also preserve indigenous literatures, especially those of minority ethnic groups like the Konkomba people I'm studying for my research or my PhD project. In terms of the scope of this project, we are hoping to broaden our horizons to include other minority cultures and literatures. But in the interim, or for now, our focus is on folk tales of the Konkomba people of Ghana. Now, the Konkomba people are located in the northeastern corridor of Ghana, and they speak a language called Lukbakban. Now, they are a minority, and so I'm sure most of us have not heard or have never heard of them. And so my research or my work is aimed at documenting the folk tales of this ethnic group using audiovisual technology or devices, after which I translate these folk tales into English and German. Then after the translation is done, we digitize them and publish them online to make them more accessible to a wider readership or audience. Now, among other things, I'm employing the translation method called foreignization. And this translation method, I chose it purposely to give visibility to the indigenous language and culture from which these folk tales are emerging or have emerged. Now, when we talk about the foreignization translation, I would like to share my screen with you so that I show you what, or a sample of the folk tales that I'm working on, if that's okay with the, okay. Can I go ahead and share the screen, screen now?
Please do. You should have the functionality. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So please, is my screen visible now?
Yes.
All right. So this is a sample of, or one of the folk tales that we have translated. Now, this is what I do. I take the recorded documents, listen to the audio sounds, then I translate them into English and German. What I do is I try not to produce fluent translation. So it's often a blend of German and Lukpakpan or English and Lukpakpan. So I feature key linguistic terms or words from the original or the source text language. As you can see, I've highlighted those keywords in red here. And at the end of the day, I try as much as possible to provide notes and glossaries, so this is a note from one of the idiomatic expressions that I used or that was used in the story. Then at the end, we have a glossary, or I have a glossary of Lukpakpan words and phrases. Then I provide explanations as to their meanings, the context within which they are normally used. And if they have any cultural, social, or political significance, I go ahead to inculcate that into the glossary aspect. Now, as you can see in this example, Knako is one of the words that I have highlighted or that are featured in the text or the English text I'm showing to you here. And Knako is simply a round room that serves as the main entrance to a typical Konkomba house. I'm going to show you that very briefly here. So this is an example of Knako here in this picture where my cursor is. Please, can you see the cursor? Where my cursor is located. Now, the picture on the left-hand side, you will see that one of them has an opening, a small opening. One of the rooms has a small opening. That room is known as the Knako. And the Knako is flanked to the right and to the left by other rooms like the one we find on the right-hand side. And normally, this serves as the main entrance.
Sorry, Tasun, we can't see the pictures.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
We still only have your writing.
Sorry, just a second. So I need.
Thanks, Robin. I wasn't sure if it was just me.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No.
Okay. Are they visible now?
Yes. Lovely.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Now, so on the left-hand side, you see a picture here, and there's one of the rooms with an opening that's known as the Knako. Now, the Knako is normally the main entrance to a typical Konkomba house. And this is the housing system that the Konkomba people have, or this is the typical Konkomba housing unit. Now, on the left and on the right, you would often have rooms like the round rooms you have here in the picture on the right-hand side. Now, the Knako is not just an entrance, it also has cultural and political significance. And so within the text, if the story has something to do with something cultural or something political, then I inculcate into the the translation or into the glossary, I inculcate or input that information so that the reader gets a picture of the context within which this story is emerging. And at the end of the day, gets not just the stories that are being presented, but also the culture and the civilization of the world, the society that has produced those stories. That is the import of what we are, or the kind of translation I have adopted. Now, at the end of the day, let me go back to my presentation, please. I'll be sharing other pictures as I move on or as I move along. Now, at the end of the day, the aim, as I said, is not just to give the story, but to also transport the culture from which the stories emerge. And the aim is to give visibility to the language and culture of this minority ethnic group through orature or through their literature. And that is what this project has basically been centered on. Now, to give this visibility, we need to engage technology. And so together with some of my colleagues here in Germany, we are digitizing these folktales, making them available online through various media, through various platforms and websites or repositories, so that at the end of the day, readers can get access to them at the click of a button. Now, we are collaborating with 4 universities, 3 universities from Ghana. So we have the University of Kwame Nkrumah, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi. We have the Ashesi University in Accra, and we also have the University for Education in Winneba. So these 3 universities are working, we are working in collaboration with them to get these documents or these folktales published at the end of the day. Now, I'm also working on a website for these folktales. so that at the end of the day, we can have a direct access to them without even belonging to these institutions. Because some of the sites that the institutions are going to provide, if you don't have, let's say, if you're not part of the institute, it may be difficult to get access to them. And so there's the need to have a website where we have these stories available for anybody who wants to read them or listen to the performances or watch the performances. Once again, I'll crave your indulgence to share my screen again so that I'll show you the website I'm currently developing. It's just a pilot project for now, so it looks it's not that good. So let me see if I can share the website. Okay, just a second, please. Okay. So here we go. Is it visible? Okay, so
yes.
Thank you. Now, so this is this. This is the website that I'm currently working on. I'm using WordPress as a platform. This is readily available for some of these things. So I'm a neophyte. I'm not a web designer. I'm just trying to, see how best I can make these tales available. So in the interim, we have Konkomba folk tales, but the plan is to broaden the horizons to include other art or indigenous art forms from other minority ethnic groups. Now, if you click here, you have access to the Konkomba folk tales, the media. Here we have audio files and video files. This is a blog. There's a podcast. Visitors can have interactions with the website and the editors as and when they wish to. So this is basically what I am currently doing. This is just a pilot of the folk tales that we are working on, or that I'm working on. Now, at the end of the day, let me stop sharing and continue with the presentation. Now, at the end of the day, the question that we may ask is, how do all these tie in with decolonizing education? For me, I believe that decolonizing education starts with decolonizing the source of education and knowledge. Now, what and where has been the center or source of the knowledge generation in our world over the centuries? It's been the global north. Now, those of us in the global south, our educational systems have been designed and structured based on knowledge and structures from the global north. We in the global south often copy and paste, so to speak, systems and knowledge contents from the global north, which I must say, over the years have not really inured to our full benefit. In Ghana, for instance, it's kind of, it's now fancy for people to say that, oh, we are running an American or a UK or a German educational system or structure. Or you hear people say we are running a Cambridge or an Oxford or a Harvard or a Yale curriculum. But the question is, how have these educational structures or systems translated into solving our peculiar problems, our peculiar economic, political, infrastructural, health, and social problems? Our medical and pharmacy students go to school and learn Western field syllabuses, come out and are expected to treat or find cures for diseases like onchocerciasis or the popular fever disease that we have from, I think, Tanzania, chikungunya. Now, this is a typical, very local disease that we can tap into our local medicinal practices or herbal knowledge to find cures for. But the unfortunate thing is, in these medical schools and departments, little or nothing at all is taught about African traditional medicine, local herbal medicines, and some of the local practices or business that have helped to manage some of these diseases over the years. If you go to architecture, our architecture students go to school and learn everything about Victorian literature. They learn about Baroque, Victorian architecture, Baroque architecture, Gothic architecture, and all that. But nothing or little is known about some of our rich local architecture, such as the Konkomba architecture that I showed you earlier when I was talking about the Pinnacle. Now you notice that though that system of building houses would have something useful to contribute to the way that we design and learn how to build or construct housing units and all that. In the upper region, and I'm always very happy to share this with people, in the upper region, the Dagaba people and the Wala people also have a very fascinating architecture or housing system. And I'll once again crave your indulgence to show you one of them, or pictures of this. Now, this is a typical room by the Wala people or the Dagaba people in the upper region of Ghana. And here you will notice that there is no roof. There is no, I mean, you don't have any tiles over the serving as a roof. There's no grass. There is no aluminum zinc, nothing. What they have done is at the top, they have flowed the whole top like this. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a full picture of the top, but at least you can see how they have flowed the top here. And normally what happens is there's a staircase. You can see the staircase here. And people can climb up there, dry things on top there. During the warm season, when it's very warm and you can't sleep in the room, you can sleep up there. And it's often very cozy, cool, and then you can sleep there. And now these are technology, or these are things that we could tap into in our educational, schools or in our curricula, so that we can put them in there, try to see how to harness them. Now, this is another picture that I took and that I often like to show. This is a popular mosque in Ghana. It's a tourist destination. It's been there since, I think, the trans-Saharan slave trade period. Now, this structure was built right from the bottom to the top with local materials. And you notice here again, there is no roof, there is nothing on top there, but it survived years and centuries. Can't we tap into some of these local knowledge? Please allow me to stop sharing the screen. Can't we tap into these local or indigenous knowledge systems or knowledge systems to harness our knowledge that we gain in school so that we can solve our local problems more pragmatically? Now, as an academic, it breaks my heart to admit that most literature students in Africa know more about the likes of William Shakespeare, the likes of Geoffrey Chaucer, the likes of Heinrich Heine, the likes of Voltaire, Emile Zola, and the others, more than our own African writers, our own folklorists, or African oral arts enthusiasts such as Ngugi wa Thiong'o or Chinua Achebe, Hubert Ogunde, Effa Sutherland, and the others. Now, we can't blame these students if they don't know much about these people, because right from the formative years at the basic level, they are taught with Western field curricula. They are taught the works of Shakespeare, the works of Geoffrey Chaucer, and all that. They don't get access to these local materials, or to study or to learn. Now, the question that I often ask is, how many African schools, especially the universities, teach African oral literature or folklore today? Most of our institutions, it's sad to say that they often treat these, I guess, probably the best they can do is to devote maybe a semester or a few sessions to oral literature, and we move on to something or other things. Now, much as we are talking about decolonizing education, we need to look at some of these things. We have these universities, they devote much attention to foreign languages, like, they have whole departments devoted to the study of German, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and the others. But local languages, we don't bother, we don't study them. Local content, oral literatures of our indigenous people, we neglect them. How can we talk about decolonizing education if this is what is happening? Much as I subscribe to globalization and knowing about the rest of the world, I also think that domestication, localization, homegrown solutions to our problems, and using indigenous knowledge to redefine ourselves, our identities, and our cultures is very important. Now, the starting point for combating colonial stereotypes and misrepresentations about one's colonized cultures and civilizations is promoting indigenous knowledge. This is the starting point. And for me, this is why I think that people like Kwame Nkrumah and other earlier Pan-Africanists worked tirelessly to introduce African studies into university curricula, set up institutes for African studies, and promoted African art and entertainment in their day. Now, today, such initiatives have sadly become walking shadows of their former selves. To pick up from where these pioneers left off, therefore, I think that we first need to acknowledge and champion the promotion of indigenous knowledge through various media and platforms. It's time we introduced it's time we re-evaluated our school curricula. It's time we introduced the teaching and learning of courses enriched with local knowledge and content that can be harnessed and productively used to solve local problems. It's time we promoted indigenous knowledge through mainstream media, various social media platforms, and other platforms such as the folktales or the digitization program that we are involved in. And I'm proud to announce to you that through this digitization project and my PhD work, we have mounted a course in Heinrich Heine. It's a 2-semester course, so we started it this semester, and I'm co-teaching this course, and it is a course that merges technology and indigenous literature. So we teach Konkomba folk tales, and we teach students how to encode and digitize these tales and make them available digitally. Then, so that at the end of the day, these can be published on various websites. Now, if Tola, do I have a few minutes left to show you something?
I think we'll have to wrap it up in 2 minutes because we're eating into Robin's time now. Thank you for checking.
All right. Okay, so let me just quickly go over. Now, so I'm happy to say that this is what is currently happening here in Heinrich Heine, and I am hoping that with time, we can get other institutions that have also expressed interest in joining this platform, especially those in the global south, like in Ghana, so that they can also begin to mount such courses for the study of indigenous literature, using technology to do or to make them more visible to the world out there. Personally, I have started a campaign to promote the teaching and learning of oral literatures back home in Ghana. I came back from Ghana in March, and so I was happy to interact with some chiefs and then academics who expressed interest in joining the project. Now, at the end of the day, the long-term plan is that I would work together with other institutions. These institutions are my colleagues, to set up a center for the study of indigenous literature. And as you probably saw from the website that I'm designing. I'm not designing the website for just Konkomba folk tales. I'm designing the website for indigenous oral art forms of various ethnic groups. So my aim is to set up a center of research for the study, the documentation, and the preservation of these indigenous literatures. I believe that this will ultimately contribute in a way to decolonizing the knowledge source that we have, not just in the global south, but also in the global north, as we are doing here in Heinrich Heine. And eventually, in fact, decolonizing education is a process. We can't get there within a day. And so gradually, we'll begin to decolonize the source of education or the source of knowledge, and also begin to point our students and people to the knowledge base or the knowledge systems of indigenous cultures or once colonized cultures, to level the ground and break the hegemony of dominant narratives, and most importantly, preserve or prevent the extinction of minority languages and cultures. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation. Tasun, can't talk about decolonisation of education without talking about the role of language and how political language is. So, as I said, I don't want to be doing too much talking, so I'm going to now pass the mic to Robin. Robin, whenever you're ready, please go ahead. Once again, I came to know Robin through his work with the Africa Education Inquiry Report that was commissioned by the Royal African Society, and I believe that he will be touching on some of that today.
Yeah.
So over to you, Robin.
Thanks, Tola. Thank you very much. I'll get straight to the presentation. Oops. Can you? Right. Can people see? Is the PowerPoint showing?
Yes.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm part of an organisation. There's just two of us in this organisation. I put a picture there so you can see my colleague Abdul Mahmoud. He's working abroad at the minute, and the internet connections proved impossible to link today. But he and I have been working together since 2013, so almost 10 years now. And the kind of work that we do is hopefully advancing some of those things that Tasun shared with us about bringing greater equality and fairness to a global perspective on history in particular. So some of the things that we've done, we've published some textbooks which are connected to the work that's going on in UK schools, English schools in particular, with respect to migration and empire. So those topics are now emerging as things that schools are teaching at 14 to 16-year-old students. And so we've written 2 of those textbooks. We've published a book about more generally about the way in which Black history is taught in our secondary schools. And as part of that work, we've been constructing what we call inquiries, which are sequences of lessons, around about 6 to 8 lessons that can be taught in schools. And those are a couple of examples of those. So we work on kind of writing and publishing, and we work on actually creating things for curriculum resources for schools to use. And we also both work in teacher education. So we're also very, very mindful of wanting to share our work and to share these ideas with beginning teachers and early career teachers, so that we get a network of scholar activist teachers who are carrying on that work in schools. So one of the things that we want to really be conscious of is how our work kind of taps into a tradition, so that we're not coming along and saying, hey, look at us, we're going to change the world. We're conscious of tapping into a global network of scholar activists. It's wonderful to hear Tasun talking today. I didn't know of his work before, but it's always heartening to recognize that there are scholars all over the world who are doing what we're doing. But there are also kind of people, our field is history, and we want to emphasize that certainly in the UK, although there's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of decolonizing the curriculum and education and culture, that work has been going on before, and we want to pay tribute to that. And often we like to engage people in what we talk about in terms of history by what we call interrupting the psyche. That is challenging the way that people usually think about things. And here's a little device that we often use in schools, in work with young people. So we give them four things, and we ask them to think, well, what's the odd one out? You may have seen it on television as well. But there's Kidwell's Close, Maidenhead, Maidstone Avenue, Chorlton, just outside Manchester, All Saints Road in Notting Hill in London, and Stenlake Terrace in Plymouth. Now, I don't know, I imagine it's going to be pretty hard for you to work this out without a clue. So we give you the clue that it's to do with 1977. And I don't know if you can imagine what was going on in these places in 1977. If you were paying attention to what England was absorbed with last weekend, then you might get the idea that actually what was going on in 1977 was that there were street parties for the Jubilee. We were engrossed in that last weekend over here, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Well, in 1977, it was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and all of those roads had a street party. But in All Saints Road, Notting Hill, there were 2 gentlemen who had other ideas. And on the left is Darcus Howe, on the right, Frank Critchlow. Darcus and Frank are part of what we would describe as the Black Power movement in London and in the UK in the 1970s. They're 2 of the Mangrove 9, the famous case of 9 people who were charged by the police with inciting a riot and were found not guilty of that charge by the highest criminal court in the land. Well, in 1977, 7 years after the Mangrove case, these 2, Darcus and Frank, decided, okay, there's a Jubilee, but our concept of Jubilee is different, and we want to offer a different street party. So in in the same day in June 1977, when everybody else was celebrating the Queen's Silver Jubilee, Frank and Darcus celebrated African Liberation Day on All Saints Road, Notting Hill. They put all the African flags out, and they had a great time. There's more to that story, which I don't have time to go into, but which is it's an interesting story. So do look it up. There's actually a short article by Robin Bunce in the London Review of Books this month, which is really fascinating. But this is the kind of thing that we do. We challenge people to think differently about England and Britain's past. So everyone's all wrapped up in the Silver Jubilee and the Queen's celebrations. Well, actually, our society has also been conscious of other things that you need to celebrate. And there has been a movement, albeit small, albeit a minority one, connected to African liberation and decolonizing for a number of years. But most of us will be much more familiar with that call to decolonize in the last 2 years. So since 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement has really taken root in England and elsewhere in the UK. And we had the toppling of the Colston statue in Bristol, the challenges to the Rhodes statue in Oxford. And this work of challenging the hegemony of colonial mentality in the curriculum, this has taken root in many of our schools and in some of our organizations, like, for instance, the Historical Association, for which we, both Abdul and I, work quite closely. So as Tola was saying, we were asked in 2021, this work of decolonizing and challenging the hegemony of ideas from the past, it actually came into Parliament, because the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Africa, a cross-party organization in Parliament, decided that they wanted to investigate the position of Africa in UK school curricula. And they partnered with the Royal African Society, and they asked us, Abdul and myself, to actually write the report of their investigation. So Lord Paul Boateng of the Labour Party was the chair. We had an online survey, about 250 people participated. We had written and oral evidence from about 40 professionals. And what we got from our investigation was well known to us, but it was supported and endorsed by what people in the UK were saying. And first of all, they were saying that there are still, after all the 50 years of Darcus and Frank working in the community, in the 1980s, we had a lot of anti-racist education work across the country. But despite all that work, there are still ignorant misconceptions about Africa in our schools and our communities. So that some of those misconceptions, perhaps the main ones are, first of all, that it's a poor place. It's a place of destitution, of poverty. Secondly, that Africa is a country. So Africa is a single homogeneous unit where you have some things like African drumming or African dancing. You have these terms for African things that don't actually distinguish between all the rich cultures, languages, traditions across this vast continent, 3 times the size of the United States of America. People are very ignorant of that. And that there are strong victim narratives of African peoples. Those are the kind of misconceptions that still dominate what young people and even what teachers think. And so to remedy that, we had to look at, well, what are the barriers to actually changing that? People have been trying to change that for some time, but what are the barriers? And the barriers are, a major barrier is the lack of knowledge amongst teachers. Because if these histories, if these cultures have not been taught before, then the teachers who are emerging will be ignorant of them because they haven't had that in their own education. So, and there isn't enough provision of resources to actually change that. It's wonderful to hear that your university, Tasun, is doing some work on changing that in the curriculum, and thank you for pioneering that. We need more of that in the UK, and it's very interesting to hear of your pioneering work for indigenous languages in Africa. We struggle even in the UK education system to honour the writing of Africans in the English language. So there were changes about 7 or 8 years ago when the government, our current government, decided to exclude writers in English who were not born in the UK from our examination syllabuses. So when they're younger, they can study Chinua Achebe, they can study Buchi Emechita, but when they get to public exams, 14 to 16, they're not allowed, teachers are not allowed to put those writers on their syllabuses. They've got to be born in the UK. And that seems to us that was one of the major things that we said really should change straight away. Because how are we ever going to get around to honouring Africans writing in their own indigenous languages if we don't even honour them in writing in the English language? So there are barriers there, not only from teacher knowledge, but also some of the structures in the examination system and the way that government thinks. There are some barriers there. It would be very easy to change. But there are people doing lots of good work. We asked the people in the survey, what are some of the people that are helping you? They mentioned SOAS, the School of Oriental African Studies. They mentioned Toby Green, a scholar at King's College London. So they mentioned universities. They mentioned organizations like British Library that have been pioneering in trying to bring new African stories to schools. Black History Walks, community organizations that are talking about Black history in our society. So there is work going on, and we thank them for it. But we made several recommendations. The recommendations that teachers' confidence and knowledge of Africa needs to be built. It's a very risky thing at the moment to actually put yourself out there and say, I am going to teach with integrity about Africa. So much of the challenge of the media and the culture wars that are making teachers feel more and more uncertain and really anxious about doing this. So teachers need their confidence and their knowledge built, and they want to do that. We feel that publishers really are in a position where they could start to pioneer textbooks that are produced about African histories, African geographies, and so publishers need to step up, and we know that some of them are doing that at the moment. We need new curriculum programs to be developed. We need funds to fund things like teacher fellowship programs where teachers can become immersed in these new ideas. And we need local school hubs where actually, because change is not going to happen by the government deciding everybody must do this or that. It's very much in schools, it comes from the grassroots, and we need to encourage that. Local school hubs would be a terrific thing. And we need, as I've just said, to reform some of the exam frameworks and change some of these ridiculous rules that have just suddenly come in. These rules are not steeped in the tradition of like 40, 50 years. The government has introduced new regulations in the last 10 years that have actually limited good practice in schools. I just shine a light on one of the little things that we've done. A lot of schools do something called What is History units. They introduce students to the discipline of history. And so we decided, and often those are done by local histories perhaps, or even just things to do with English history, like the Normans or stuff like that. Well, we've said to teachers, why not start your What is History course with Africa and start with something that is so important, the origins of religions in Africa. And so we introduced them to this church, for instance, in Ethiopia. I tell you it's a church, but actually we get the students to think about what kind of building might this be. And when they realize that actually this building is carved out of the ground. It's at Lalibela in Ethiopia. And the students, again, their minds are expanded, almost exploded, with the way in which African people have been so creative and innovative in their structures. And the churches at Lalibela do that. And so that's one of the things that they explored. Nothing to do with colonization, nothing to do with European impact, just looking at the way in which you can learn about history through these buildings. So learning about history through evidence, through buildings, through the built environment. We also look at coins in Aksum. So we study Ethiopia, and then we go on to look at the origins of Islam in Africa. So not only Christianity was very early on in the history of the religion, it was present in Africa. African Christianity has so much to offer us, and yet we think Europeans think they brought Christianity to Africa. Absolute nonsense. But in a similar way, Islam came very early to Africa. When the Prophet wanted to send his family for safety when Islam was beginning, he sent them to Aksum, the very same civilization that introduced Christianity, also gave safety to Islam. The ruler of Aksum didn't convert immediately, but he gave sanctuary. And so Islam has been connected to Africa right from the start. And we look at sources and evidence that can show that. And then also coming down into the Middle Ages, looking at Mansa Musa and the pilgrimage to Mecca and so on. So we actually have developed 5 different inquiries about Africa. We do one about the Ashanti and the Golden Stool in Ghana. We do one about Timbuktu and the learning, the universities of Timbuktu. We do one about religion in Africa. We do one about the way in which Europeans constructed this idea about the dark continent. We help students to understand how that came about, and then show them the sources of Mapungubwe and Great Zimbabwe, to show them that these 19th century historians got it completely wrong. But they knew they got it wrong when they saw these things, and yet still they kept those myths going. And lastly, we have an inquiry about apartheid in South Africa, again looking at a character who interrupts the psyche. This is a cleric called Beyers Naudé, who was in the Dutch Reformed Church and actually leaves the church after the Sharpeville massacre and challenges the apartheid regime. And so we look at, why did Beyers Naudé break rank from his church in 1963? So those are currently our African inquiries. We'd like to do more. We'd like to do one about the actual struggles in Rhodesia and Zimbabwe in the decolonization process, and also about Congo in the Cold War. But just lastly, to finish, just what we're doing at the moment is trying to look at this process of decolonizing that Tasun brought to us, and look at it in terms of how schools in the UK are doing that. One of the problems is that you have to start somewhere, and we know that there's a stage 1 where really you're just talking about the presence of diverse histories. You're looking at individual heroes like Mansa Musa, like Nelson Mandela. It's a non-racist, non-sexist stage. It doesn't actually tackle the oppressions and the structures, but it's a start. And we don't want to sort of say to people, oh, you shouldn't just be doing that. We want to say, okay, that's a nice start, but we want to encourage you, but please be wary of staying at that stage for too long. We worry that schools are doing that. You need to move to stage 2, where you're actually entering into it. You're going beyond a presence of diverse histories, and you're establishing a discourse of diverse histories, where you're actually looking not just at things that will nullify the exclusion, you're actually trying to understand how that exclusion happened in the first place. So looking at the forces of colonialism, racism, sexism, and actually challenging those deeply in the curriculum. Eventually, you can reach stage 3, where actually you're integrating all people's histories. A lot of people would like to say, well, that's what we think should happen. Yeah, of course it should. But it can't be a jump from stage 1 to stage 3. You need to go through stage 2. Otherwise, the forces of oppression are going to stay with us, and they're going to continue to impact on the work. The pinnacle of equality can only come through stage 2. And that's us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Very soon be opening the, Anne's raised her hand, so she has a question. I'll very soon be opening the floor to questions, but I do have a couple. I know that Tasun has to go quite soon. I'm sure Robin has a busy day as well. So I have one for each of you. Tasun, as you were talking, I loved the intervention. I particularly was drawn to the parts about language, but also about the hegemony of Western perspectives. I was watching a video recently that spoke about musical theory, and said that musical theory should be substituted with 18th century European musical theory. It's not a universal objective thing. I can post that link. I can post that in the link, since we're talking about decolonising education. That's very interesting. It's about a 45-minute documentary on YouTube. You spoke about architecture, you spoke about literature, you covered lots of domains, and you talked about how they are monopolized by Western or European perspectives. And my thinking was, absolutely, this is so true, but take something like architecture, where there's, as we've spoken about, gatekeepers and questions of legitimacy, questions of recognition of qualifications across borders. And I'm just wondering, Tasun, I guess it's a question about legitimacy. How do we, in honoring and valorizing local traditions, local knowledge, as you said, to solve local problems, but in terms of students who have an international outlook as well, what is your vision in the long term, if you have one, about recognition of these, how do we get there? I mean, I know it's a bit of a broad question, and maybe it's not a very fair question. And linked to that also is in terms of funding for the work you're doing in Germany, and that kind of thing. And Robin, you might be able to speak to this later as well, but in terms of funding for these projects, what is that looking like at the moment?
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's quite interesting that over the years, we have not really paid attention to the local wealth of knowledge and contributions that have been made to various aspects of world history, world development. And I'm very happy that Justice to History is doing such an amazing job. Now, to the question as to how to get this recognition for local content or traditional indigenous knowledge. Yeah, it's a gradual process, as I said. We begin from the foundational stages by, first of all, acknowledging that, yes, we have something from the local context to offer. I have often said that if it worked for our forefathers, it can and should work for us, if only we apply it properly. Now, when we talk about indigenous knowledge, we are not just talking about the abstract. There is evidence to show. Now, that's why I'm saying that let's begin at the roots. And the root is, let's get this information inculcated into mainstream curricula in school. Let's start learning. Let's start studying. Let's teach our children that the misconception that everything that is worth studying or looking at, or everything that is good, is from the West. I'm sure you've heard this. In Africa, everything good comes from the West. This is something that some people keep saying in Ghana, with all kinds of undertones attached to such statements. So it's not about the fact that everything good comes from the West. We need to decolonize that perception. We need to break that perception. Those are the dominant narratives that have pervaded history over the years. And in our schools, it's amazing that our teachers go to school and they teach all these things without paying attention to the local content that is available to us in our very own surroundings. It's not their fault. They cannot teach what's not in the syllabus. So we need to begin from that point. Let's begin teaching the young ones, and when they come out, then once there is that will to do or to change, even if we are not able to do it today, the younger generation that will grow up to be politicians, to be the architects, and to be the medical doctors, they'll begin to look into these areas and begin to develop structures that will accommodate local content, that will make local content visible and make it, gain that recognition outside. Now, we shouldn't just do that in the global south. We should be looking at promoting these knowledge systems and content in the global north as well. And I'm very happy with what's happening that the process has begun in the global north, in the UK, in the US. Yes, from the presentation that Robin gave, I got a glimpse into some of the things or the projects that are ongoing. These are amazing projects, and we can contribute, we can do more to gain more visibility or to give more visibility to local content. Let us know that we have something to offer. We'll begin at the local level, at the basic level, and then once we get it into the system, we'll start studying these things, then we'll begin to think more broadly. We'll begin to have more globalized view of, the things that we teach and study in school. Now, on the issue of funding, yes, the project is currently funded by the university. We have a research fund for projects that are into or interested in digitization and technology-based, teaching and learning. So we applied for the fund from that chest, and we got the funding for 2 academic semesters. So the program that we are running, the project is for 2 semesters, this semester and next semester. So it's a 2-semester course that we are running.
Excellent. It's good to see that the university is supporting it wholeheartedly. And what you're saying in terms of the curriculum is actually quite advanced. That's actually being embedded and integrated into the university mainstream. So I hope that's something that goes beyond being a pilot. Robin, this is more on a personal, still related, but on a personal level, is I guess you didn't have time to go into this because of the constraints. If you could briefly outline what was the impetus for your interest in better representation in history, and yes, more well-rounded, holistic understandings of African history and geopolitics. Where did that come from for you?
That's a nice question. Thanks, Tola. I suppose I sometimes talk now about the idea that there was a first wave anti-racist movement in education, and what we're in at the minute is the second wave. So the first wave was the 80s. In the 1980s, there was a lot of amazing stuff going on, particularly in London with the Greater London Council, and that's when I started my teaching in London in 1980, and I suppose my interest came from that. It came from, although I grew up in London, and so I had some friends who were of African heritage. Mainly in the 80s, I was teaching so many more young people who came from African and African Caribbean backgrounds. I also was worshipping in a church where a lot of the congregation were of African Caribbean background. I just grew to love the people, and then therefore I want to know more about the history. And then we started to develop more of these diverse histories at that time. And that kind of stayed with me all the way through the 90s and the 2000s in the school that I was in. And it's only when I came out of schools after 30 years of working in schools, I came to the university in 2010 to train teachers to become history teachers. And when I started that work, that's when I kind of started to feel we need to do more of a kind of movement, if you like. Abdul was actually in the first group of teachers that I trained. And so we started to do a little bit of work together about British Somali history, because he's of Somali heritage. None of this work had ever been done in schools before. And so we started with that, and then it just grew, really. Yeah.
Lovely. I like to hear origin stories because it's interesting, especially and I think it's important in terms of, they're different contested terms, whether it's comradeship, allyship, but I think it is important that we have, especially as a white male, we have people who are also making the case from the position of privilege, let's say. So that's really important. I am now going to open the floor to questions. Just before I do that, I would ask our speakers to please remember before you go to drop your details where people can read more about your work or reach out to you if they want to know more information, or maybe book you for future events. And also, Robin, that article about the African Liberation Day that you mentioned that was in, I don't know if it's the Times.
It's the London Review of Books.
London Review Books, all right. So I will be looking that up whilst we take questions. So Anne Wafer first and then Eve. So Anne, please open your mic. Don't forget, if you have any problems with your audio, you can drop your question in the chat and someone from the Labour International team will read it out on your behalf.
Yeah, this has been very interesting. It's sparked a lot of thoughts and questions. So I'm not sure how well I'm going to put this all together. Some of it's comments, some of it's questions. But I lived in Ireland for 28 years, which kind of opened my eyes to colonialism, as I guess it was the first colony, Britain's first colony anyway. And then I studied, I did a Master of Arts in ethnochoreology, which is like anthropology of dancing, which was very, very interesting. And it also, apart from other things, it opened my eyes to Western ethnocentrism, which is looking at everything from our Western point of view and thinking everything is Western is better, as has already been mentioned. And we studied the history of anthropology. And there were two main approaches. And the etic approach, that was the more traditional one, where somebody from the Western culture goes off to this exotic foreign culture, exotic in our minds, and studies it from the Western point of view and explains it, which was the traditional approach. And some of them didn't even go, the earlier ones didn't even go to the places they were studying. They sat at home in their armchairs and got reports from missionaries, returned colonialists and military people, and that was pretty much rubbish. They got a lot of that wrong, but at least they were trying, I guess. And then you have the etic approach, the emic approach, which is studying the culture from the point of view of the people in that culture, which is pretty interesting. And now we have more people. It's very interesting to hear Tasun, and we have more people studying their own cultures now and telling us about them. And I'm wondering, first, do you think anthropology should be a standard subject in schools so that everyone gets an insight into these different cultures? And I would love to see anthropologists from Africa and other places actually doing anthropologies of Western culture, which would be very interesting. Another question is, a lot of the important knowledge, now Tasun, you said you're focusing on literature and preserving literature, but a lot of the important knowledge is actually transmitted orally or by practically showing people. You just watch someone and do it. So how would you preserve those parts of the culture? And no, did I have anything else to say? Particularly an interesting example that of ethnocentrism. Now, we always assume that Western music is superior and that other kinds of music is a bit more primitive. But in fact, there was a culture in Africa, I can't remember which one, who had such complicated and complex system of scales and tones and microtones that when the Western missionaries went there and sang out of tune, they could replicate exactly the out of tuneness that the missionaries sang in. I thought that was a very good illustration of the Western attitudes. Was there something else? I think I have another thing. That'll probably do for now.
Yeah, I think so. It's quite comprehensive. So, Tasun and Robin, I hope you're able to. From my understanding, Anne asked a question about anthropological approaches, whether it's germane to this, or it can be made to be germane to decolonisation. And I think I can't remember the second part of Anne's question, but she can always prompt you if you forget. Either of you
Okay.
can go first.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks a lot. These are very, very good observations and comments from Anne. Thanks a lot for the contribution. It's very interesting, some of the research that has been done in the field of culture, literature, and language, and history, especially from historians and scholars from the global north. And I've had the opportunity to point out to people and my colleagues here that it's always better as a researcher to go down to where the problem is. Armchair research does not help anybody. At the end of the day, you'll be scratching the surface of the problem, and you'll be dabbling into speculations and unfounded conclusions that will end up misinforming people. So the issue of research, immersion into community or into what you are researching or writing about, getting first-hand experience and knowledge is always the best way to go. And that brings me to the issue of anthropology. Should anthropology be made compulsory? That's a very interesting question. In my view, it should, because if we are dealing with issues of decolonizing or decolonization, then we are considering or looking at the society as a whole. We are looking at the human involvement or the human history that has transpired or happened over ages, over periods, over centuries. So if we are going to go into them to decolonize certain misrepresentations, certain concepts and attitudes, I think that it will take a larger group of people than just a few academics who gather to discuss and write papers and publish them that may end up on shelves and other platforms that wouldn't reach the grassroots. Now, if we make anthropology or the study of anthropology compulsory, at least a larger group of people get the opportunity to study the basic things that are needed or to gain basic knowledge about various institutions, various peoples and cultures that are relevant to the decolonization campaign that we are working or we are talking about. So yes, I'm all for it. As far as the issue of decolonization is concerned, it's not just about education, but in other aspects as well. And anthropologists play a very important role. They have always and they will continue to play that role. So it's a very good suggestion, and I think that yes, policymakers in the various areas or regions, and as I campaign or as I continue with my campaign to get indigenous literature and other lessons inculcated into tertiary education or tertiary institutions or curricula in Ghana, I think these are the other issues I'm going to be discussing or I'm going to be raising. Thanks a lot, Anne, for this perspective. And to the second question, the issue of how to preserve the oral aspects of indigenous literature or these literatures that I'm looking at. Yes, it's been a problem over the years as to how to preserve, because the text, as for the text, we can preserve the text, but then the oral aspects, how do we capture them in text? And that has always been the problem. Now, today, fortunately, we have media, we have various platforms, we have video devices that we can use to capture the live performances. We have audio sounds that audio devices we can use to capture these performances. So we have the opportunity more than, in fact, now more than ever, to document these oral pieces and get them preserved so that children yet unborn, generations yet unborn, would also have access, even when such minority or even when certain minority languages get extinct generations of years to come, at least they can still have access to these video and audio documents. And that's why our project is not just limited to translating these folk tales, but also embedding in the text. So one of the things that we are doing here as part of the course we are teaching, the digitization program, we embed links to audio sounds of these stories and to video sounds of the live performances of these stories. So readers get the opportunity to read the text and also watch the video to see the storytelling conventions and the very context and atmosphere within which these stories are presented. So we have those systems in place, or those things in place, to help with the orality or the oral aspects or the performance aspects of these tales or these oral materials. And I think these will go in a long way to help with preserving the oral content. I don't know if I've answered your question satisfactorily.
Yeah, I think so, yes. So you're not just focusing on written literature. That's what I really wanted to know, I guess. Thanks.
Excellent answers. And when you were speaking about the preservation of oral languages, I was thinking about Hebrew and how Hebrew was considered a dead language for maybe even centuries, I'm not sure. But certainly for generations, and then it was revived in the 20th century because I guess there were people who've been caretakers of the language, even though it was no longer active for a very long time. Before moving on to Eve, I just wanted to ask if Robin had a response for Anne. No obligation, but if you would like to chip in.
I think Tasun has wonderfully expressed lots of my thoughts, what my thoughts would be. But I think one of the things I'd say from a history educator's point of view in the UK is that my view has always been that our subject is interdisciplinary, that at the heart of history, it's interdisciplinary. So it should involve the social sciences and a whole wealth, which the social sciences can offer us a wealth of sources beyond just the archive of written documents. But of course, there is a very strong tradition in the UK that's what history is about. It's about written documents. And so you have to break that down in order to get that interdisciplinarity into the way we approach our subject. It's not fashionable because a lot of those interdisciplinary subjects like sociology, so anthropology, they are the ones that are going to provide us with the insights to tackle the hegemony of that decolonizing the curriculum stage 2. Those forces, we need the social sciences to do that. And of course, one way of shutting down the questioning of stage 2 is to vilify those subjects. And that's what has happened in the last 10 years, is that the establishment has been vilifying the social sciences and saying that these are trying to kind of brainwash young people. We need to get back to knowledge-rich curricula, as if sociology and anthropology don't offer knowledge. Knowledge just comes from the traditional narratives that have been written down. So it's all the honoring of anthropology and the social sciences is part of the struggle that we're in at the moment. Yeah, that's all I would have added. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks.
Excellent point, actually. That's a really interesting, and that, this is a political education event, and it's good. We have to bring it back to politics. And as you're speaking, Robin, I was thinking about the backlash in the Anglosphere, at least, against critical race theory. I think it's also infected also mainland Europe as well.
Absolutely.
I know in France has been a backlash against certain elements of these types of discourses, but definitely in the UK and the US, you hear this.
I mean, obviously, we're the ignorance about CRT is enormous. But what has happened, you're absolutely right. What has happened is that sociology, anthropology, all these perspectives have been lumped under critical race theory. Anything that smacks of these critical thoughts. So, I mean, I'm sure that they would say Bourdieu is critical race theory. So it's a madness. Yeah, it's a madness.
Yeah. But you know what, thankfully we have a lot more, the gatekeepers aren't, because of the internet and the democratization of knowledge, the gatekeepers don't have as much of a grip. So we just have to keep doing that work of plowing on and reaching the ordinary people, the grassroots, really, to let them know that there's nothing to be afraid of. Eve, sorry for the delay. Thank you for your patience. Could you please unmute yourself and go ahead? Thank you.
Hi, mine is, it's okay, I didn't mind, I was fascinated by what people were saying. Mine was more a little bit of commentary, but there is a kind of question wrapped up in it. I'm from Guyana, and in Guyana, which was British Guyana when I was born, when I went to school, there was not even a Caribbean novel or poem on our curriculum. Okay, and I went to school, secondary school, between 1964 and 71. Now, in that period of time, we had become independent, that was in 66, and then we had become a republic, which was in 1970, and the curriculum still hadn't changed at that point. So the curriculum was still Chaucer and Shakespeare mainly, although schools were beginning to introduce some Caribbean writers into the curriculum. I mean, I remember the very first Caribbean play that was enacted at school, A Raisin in the Sun, you know, which was kind of like one of the early examples of this. Our history lessons were mainly based on people like Alan Burns, you know, history of the British West Indies and others. I mean, even the Haitian Rebellion was written about as some kind of aberration, you know, nothing like the amazing protest that it was, an amazing historical event that it was. And then when I came to the UK, which was in 1974, I was shocked at how many people didn't even know where Guyana was, or had even heard of it, even in spite of the fact that it had been a British colony. That really shocked me. But then when I thought about it later, I knew more about fishing industry in Hull than I did about, you know, my father's family. Part of my father's family came from Nigeria and Sierra Leone. I knew nothing about agricultural and you know, farming practices in Sierra Leone and Nigeria. So I suppose in there is a question about how do we bring all of the development together. I mean, I'm sure I'm not up to date, I have to admit, hold my hands up. I'm not up to date about how things are taught in Guyana now. And I would hope clearly, and I know they have, things have changed a lot. I mean, for example, one of the most eye-opening moments for me was reading how Europe underdeveloped Africa. I mean, my parents were friends of Walter Rodney, and some of my family members, but obviously he didn't write the book. When I was at school, that book hadn't been written. And then when I read that, I think the most fascinating chapter for me in that whole book was the chapter about African civilizations prior to the West arriving in Africa. So that's the chapter I go back to, because it takes a lot of reading. And I just wondered about, given what is I'm trying to say? We need to develop together, don't we? We need to develop something that reflects the realities of history. That's not a strange thing to say, across the whole diaspora, you know, to include Britain and the Caribbean and parts of Africa. I mean, I know from some Sudanese friends of mine that a lot of British history was taught in Sudan, the same as it was taught to me in Guyana. You know, they didn't know a lot about how the Sudanese struggle. They knew about Khartoum and the British struggle in Sudan. So I'm just wondering about the links that people are making between how things might develop in Britain in relation to the curriculum and how things might have been developing throughout the Caribbean and parts of Africa in relation to curriculum development.
Robin, Tasun, do you want to go ahead with? Thank you for that. That's really that's really good to have that from the ground knowledge and to situate it in real lived experience. So thank you for that, Eve.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the kind of what I called anti-racism wave 1 in the 80s. There was probably more of that kind of connection, perhaps at that time, a sense of a global struggle. I don't think there is that sense at the moment. I think our struggles are perceived as being much more narrow, maybe because what we're actually struggling against is quite sharply focused. I mean, it was a question actually I was going to, not to kind of do that terrible politician thing of turn what I should be answering into a question, but I think part of the reason where perhaps that's being lost is that I'm concerned that at the moment the imagination and the creativity appears to be with the opponents of decolonizing the curriculum. Although, you know, we've had that imagination, politically at least, that the right seem to have all the ideas that are coming out and being supported by government. That's particularly true in teacher education. And I'm trying to look to Labour and see where are your imaginative ideas? Where are your ideas? And to be frank, I'm struggling. Yeah. And I recognize that it would be really important to make those global links. I have a doctoral student at the moment who's working in Jamaica, and she's looking at pedagogy and curriculum in Jamaica. But there's no initiative happening between UK and Jamaica in terms of curriculum development. It's sort of like what's going on over there. And the same in Africa. Abdul and I were in Accra in 2019, and we got to meet Akosia Purby at University of Legon. And again, we would love to establish kind of connections, but it's ironic that Germany is much more interested in those kind of links than the UK. That's the sad reality. I'm sorry, Eve, to be kind of a bit dismal about the prospect, but it's something that we need to be doing more of, I know.
Robin, I think with just even the presence of organisations like Justice to History and even the commissioning of the African Society, I'm a bit conflicted about it because it still has a kind of colonial, I don't know if outlook, but a colonial overhang. But I think these kind of things are still important and to have. And also in terms of Labour, in the 2019 election manifesto, there was talk about whether they called it decolonising education. They might have not gone that far because it considered inflammatory, but there was talk of a more well-rounded study of history and things like that under the previous leader. It remains to be seen, and anything can happen between now and the next election, who knows, but it remains to be seen what the short-term direction will be. I know that there is a contingent within the PLP, a very small one, that has an internationalist outlook. And obviously within the membership, there'll be quite a broad, if you look at some of the groups that are allied with the Labour Party, such as Momentum, amongst them, you have people who have that kind of outlook. So I think the internationalism is definitely there, but as you said, maybe bring it into a coherent strategy or movements. I think there's a lot of convincing that needs to be done across many fronts when it comes to internationalism. Sorry, Tasun, let me not eat into your time. We're going to be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thanks a lot, Eve, for your wonderful contributions and observations. Yes, I agree. Immediately after independence, around the 1960s, we were still running the colonial syllabus or curricula in Ghana. And so even right after independence, most of the degrees were still awarded. Even though Legon was established, the University of Ghana was established, we were still being, as it were, awarded degrees by the British institutions or institutions from the colonial authorities, until eventually the University of Ghana became autonomous and started awarding this. And a lot has gone into developing or working to, in fact, from the initial stages, there was this passion by the likes of Nkrumah and the others to make the content that was taught in schools or in our educational lessons very local and very African, so that we could promote African knowledge. Now, over the years, this passion has died. That's the thing. And that's why in my presentation, I said some of these initiatives have become walking shadows of their former selves. Because at the end of the day, we should have continued. This was the beginning. The early Pan-Africanists began a process that should have been built upon to include other areas. In the area of African studies, in the area of music, in the area Oh, and music brings me, I'll comment on the issue of, or the idea of music being gleaned through the eyes of the West, But then issues of music and entertainment were at the forefront, or the Pan-Africanists were very interested in promoting the local content in these areas. But if you look at other subjects that are taught in school, I mean, nothing much has changed in terms of, let's take science, for instance. Let's take, philosophy, for instance. Let's take courses like even our own political science. When we started learning chieftaincy and those other things at the basic level. I was taught those things as life skills, as part of life skills. Then later on, we changed them to social studies and all that. But over time, some of these things have changed. Governments have come, and because of their parochial interests and other things, most of these things have changed. We don't even have life skills and those things anymore. They've turned into something else. And so my argument, or my point, is that these steps began after independence to decolonize the structure or the curriculum. But over the years, because of a few problems here and there, we have relaxed, and we are perpetuating or continuing to douse our curricula with foreign materials or foreign knowledge. It is good, but I'm just saying that we need to balance it. That's what we need to do. And that brings me to your question on how to link the various activities that are ongoing. Yes, it's very important that what's happening in Ghana, what's happening in the UK, we're able to collaborate and then share ideas, share opinions. Unfortunately, that networking hasn't begun. I don't know. If it has, I've not come across that yet, but I think that with time, eventually networking will begin to emerge between various organizations and institutions that are working here and there. And we've already begun that here in Germany with this program that is ongoing, this partnership that has, begun between Heinrich Heine and these universities in Ghana. I'm hoping that with time, and right now we are even thinking about organizing a workshop next year in collaboration with some Ghanaian universities. And that workshop, we are planning to have it in Ghana. So that Global South, Global North partnership and collaborations, I think those collaborations will be very useful in helping to decolonize curricula, not just in the Global North, but also in the Global South, so that we can have a uniform, effort as we move ahead. So there's hope. Even though I've not come across such strong initiative or partnerships, there is hope that we are going to get there. And that brings me to the issue of legitimacy. I think the first question Tola asked bordered a little on legitimacy and those things. Yes, and I've often had the opportunity to tell people that, look, those who are arguing about legitimacy, we need to be careful. When we talk about legitimacy, we should think also about visibility. Because if you want to give visibility and recognition to, indigenous knowledge and indigenous cultures and the Global South, Global North, then we need to also be very flexible. If not, collaborations will be very difficult. Because if you are thinking about people who are working on these issues from privileged positions, and you say that they have no, basis getting involved, then at the end of the day, we are going to be silencing some of these voices that are very, very important in helping us in the process of decolonization. You see that? And I always use this Chibok girls example, that when those girls were kidnapped, a lot of noise was made locally, but the government was a bit hesitant and the response was slow until we started getting people getting involved, the Michelle Obamas raising their voices and all that. Then we saw a lot of action. So those collaborations, we need them. And I'm very, very sure that with time, the various activities that are ongoing, we are going to find common platforms that we can use to share ideas and collaborate to unify our efforts. There is hope.
Indeed, I like to end on hope. So Anne Greenslade, would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
I'd like to comment simply to thank the speakers, because it's been an extremely interesting talk. I've learned a great deal from it, and no, I don't have a question. just one last comment. If anybody wants to save the chat, to save the information given there, you simply open the chat box, you look for the 3 little dots on the bottom right-hand corner, click on that, and you'll have the option to save chat. It will download into a file on your computer. But that's all I want to say, but thank you again.
Thank you, Anne. That's a great thinking. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, so thank you. As Anne said, it's just the 3 little dots of parenthesis in the chat function, and you can save it. You don't need a Zoom account to save it, and then you'll have all the details of the speakers as well as any follow-up information. I can only see Anne's hand up, so I'm going to go with Anne, assuming everyone else is just happy to observe the conversation. And can you go ahead with one last quick comment or question before we wrap up?
Okay, well, I've got 3, but I'll try and do them as quickly as possible. First, to Robin, many of us think our current leadership is lacking in ideas, which wasn't the case with the previous one. I think even the way we teach British culture and history needs to be decolonialized, because people have come to identify their cultures as being the culture of our ruling classes, you know, Union Jacks and royal family and everything. And there's a lot to working class history and ordinary country people's history that we don't taught in schools, and I've only started to learn a lot of it since I joined the Labour Party. And then even the way we divide up our topics for I think even the way we teach British culture and history needs to be decolonialized, because people have come to identify their cultures as being the culture of our ruling classes, you know, Union Jacks and royal family and everything. And there's a lot to working class history and ordinary country people's history that we don't taught in schools, and I've only started to learn a lot of it since I joined the Labour Party. And then even the way we divide up our topics for study, say music a separate thing from history and separate thing from dancing, is a Western concept. Other cultures divide things up in different ways. And I mean, we studied West African dancing, but we also had to play drums and sing because they were all the one thing. They weren't separated. And music isn't always for entertainment in different cultures. And what we call music might not be lumped together. All the things we call music might not be lumped together in another culture. They might call them different things. So that is also a Western concept we need to look at.
Excellent, thank you, and that was lovely and concise. Robin, Tasun, do you have any closing remarks in response to Anne? I mean, that's another that's another online event, I think, and I'll definitely be asking both of you back. I think we're going to have to do like in another year or 18 months, we'll have to do something to like a follow-up session, because I think this is something that will be of great interest to people, and I hope the recording will be available soon enough, so people can get a taste who can attend today, and they can come to a future event, and maybe Abdul will be able to join us then as well. So carry on. Yes.
My presentation, or our presentation, there's a link in the chat to the presentation, so you're very welcome to download that and share it with your colleagues, your various networks.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. And Tasun, do you have any parting comments before we wrap up and let you wonderful people go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday?
Okay, I would like to say thanks a lot for the opportunity, and I've learned a lot from all of us, and I'm hoping that the discussion we have started will grow and yield very good fruits, and we can have the desired results we are looking for. Unfortunately, the projects that we are currently running, they are not online yet, so I can't provide links, I mean, for you yet. Probably in maybe next year, we'll be able to provide links, and we can have people can have access to the projects that we've worked on, or the projects we are working on. In the meantime, I just want to say thanks a lot and all the best to everybody.
Thank you both. It's really very much a very galvanizing discussion, and thank you also for the questions and participation from the floor. And I think I'm definitely motivated to do this again in a year time or so. I think it'd be very good to do follow up, because I'm sure a lot would have moved on from then as well in terms of your current projects. So unless anyone has anything urgent they want to say, I'm going to let you all go. We're going to close the meeting. We thank you so much. We'll make the recording available as soon as we can. We're at the moment we're having some issues with video editing because our previous volunteer is no longer available to do so. But as soon as this is available, it will be circulated if you want to pass it on to friends and family who'd be interested. All right, then. Thank you once again, both to Tasun and Robin. It's an excellent thank you. Solidarity. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday. Bye.
Thank you. And thank you to Tola as well.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Robin.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.